So today, we're going to talk about natural family planning, and we will begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Heavenly Father, you are the giver of life and the giver of all that is good. We thank you for the gift of your Son, Jesus, and the commandments that bring us into right relationship with you and others. We ask that you would give us the grace to have open hearts to hear your teaching this day. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so natural family planning. We're piggybacking off of last week. We were talking about theology of the body and God's plan for the body and God's plan for human sexuality. And so it makes sense that we have time dedicated to natural family planning. And just to kind of reiterate that the gift of sexuality in the conjugal act is shared between husband and wife in the context of a marital covenant. And so anything outside of that is, outside of that marital covenant is not of God. And so this is, natural family planning is, I'm not going to say too much about it because I already have guests that will speak about it, but it is the church's teaching, so I pray that all of us will have open hearts to hear what this teaching is today, and I hand it over to Christina and Simon. Thank you for coming today.
So, good morning, and thanks for having us. Thanks for inviting us to discuss this interesting subject, which relates to probably my favorite subject, which is sex. So, hey, nothing wrong with that. I'm Simon Purnell. This is my lovely bride, Christina. We've been married going on 30 years next year. Married relatively young, but we'd already gone through a lot before then. We'll kind of go into the details of that later on. I know we have, I guess it's about 45 minutes to chat. This is a subject that you can kind of briefly touch on in 5 minutes or just go on and on for many, many hours. Christina's probably more familiar with the sort of practicalities of natural family planning. So not the practicality, but the mechanics, I guess. But we'll get into some of those issues. But I think just so as a signpost of where we're going today, very high level, just sort of how this impacts our married life, how it's sort of a teaching of the church is positive, an example of teachings of the church that can be sometimes confusing. And while one may not be married, one may not be sort of conception age, let's put it that way, it still matters because it's kind of one of those things at the church that we're questioned about as Catholics when we're out there like, I got problems with the church. It's contraception, it's the Mary thing, it's a Eucharist thing, so I mean, it's always going to be one of those, so it's good to understand it just generally. I'll tell you just a little background on who I am and Christina maybe will say a little bit about herself, but I'll brag on her anyway. So I'm, as you can tell, I'm a Latino. So I was born and raised in Venezuela. Yeah, exactly. I was born and raised in Venezuela, but oddly not a Catholic. I was raised as in the Church of England. My parents are British. They moved to Venezuela in the 60s. I just happened to be born there and raised there. Didn't really have a big religious life. It was more of a social thing, if anything, just to be fair to my parents. They did take us to church, but it's kind of a society thing. So I didn't have any big issues, So when I met Christina when I came to the States after having gone back to the UK, then I came over here, I meet this Catholic girl, and she's like, "Hey, you want to go to church?" I was like, "What?" So, but I was like, "No, fine." So I ended up really.
Okay, you did not go that day.
No, I didn't. But I ended up going to church. You know, it's they say you meet a Catholic girl and you marry a Catholic girl, you become Catholic. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. It took a little bit though. I was still very convinced of my Church of Englandness. Then anyway, we got married, and then I actually became Catholic after we got married, which was sort of interesting. Received into the church through Father Barber, who was here years ago, who was actually a convert from the Episcopal Church into the Catholic Church, was married. It was kind of weird. So it was like super cool way to come to the church, but not exactly the point of the talk. But so that's sort of how I came into my Catholicism. So as a convert myself, we're probably the worst kind of Catholics, I guess, but whatever. I did go to school here, did become an American because I married Christina. We met while we were in college. You know, I went to law school, she went to medical school. She's a pediatrician. I don't know what else we can say, other than the really important part. We have a family, a beautiful family that we love and adore, that's continuing to grow even at our advanced age. And by that I do not mean she's pregnant. I mean that our progeny are having their own progeny. So we're actually grandparents, believe it or not, which is super cool. We got 3 beautiful little granddaughters. We have 5 kids ourselves that are still with us.
Okay, so they're still with us, and we've got 2 in heaven because I miscarried twice, so he has a hard time with that. That's very sweet.
And I don't know why. You know, it's kind of weird because when we went through it, it wasn't that. But it's just like there's just this belief, right? So, and it's a very real physical belief for me. And so, but the 5 beautiful kids and the 2 in heaven are always with us. It wasn't really my plan. You know, I was Church of England. Our parents were very, very Protestant in terms of, you know, we're going to have 2 children. It's just, everything's just so. I never thought I'd have a bunch of kids. I didn't think we'd have the big man. You know, I really didn't think we were going to be those people. You know, she was a doctor, I was a lawyer, we're going to be just perfect, and everything was going to just fit the way it's supposed to. But God has a funny way of kicking your plan in the ass, literally. I mean, he was just like, shut up, no, you know. And this is how we got here. Part of the journey was getting into natural family planning, because I'll tell you, anyway, we'll get into those details later. I think I've spoken enough about us, so you kind of understand where we're coming from, and I'll let her say some things. You may have not, I don't take things very seriously, so everything's a joke to me, actually. So, but
You're like me.
she's the more serious one. Like, she's very serious, really kind of boring sometimes. But, so I'm here to make it funny. But to finish it off, she's no longer practicing. She homeschools our kids, who are great. And I unfortunately have to work now. I'm married to a doctor. It's like, really, the idea was that I was not going to be working. And I'm a trial lawyer. I represent pedophiles and drug dealers, so which is my happy part. And then we also do some civil litigation. So anyway.
So just a real quick, so I did grow up Catholic, but I don't even know that, I mean, we got to church like most Christmases and Easters, maybe. So my mom grew up very Catholic. So my family, I'm as well Latina, my family's from El Salvador, and so she grew up very Catholic, daily mass, Catholic school, all that kind of thing. And but my Catholicism really came from my grandparents. And just by the grace of God, I thought that it was important. And so I sort of had to, not in a prideful way, but just a practical way for myself later on through high school, My best friend was Catholic. We'd go to Mass together, and in college we would go to Mass together. And so then I kind of ended up forming myself. I did not, however, form myself in natural family planning. I had no idea that it even existed. Didn't even know that I was supposed to be doing that. You know, just nobody told me. So this was a new thing for me after we got married, and we'll go into that a little bit at the end. So basically, what is natural family planning? Like, what does that even mean? I don't know how much she's even told you. I teach high school students, so if I talk to you like you're 13, I'm not being disrespectful, it's just what I do. So I know I'm a physician, right? So I teach high school at my co-op, so we homeschool and we have a co-op, and so I teach some theology classes and some science classes. So I think the whole idea with natural family planning is, we're here, you guys are here voluntarily to learn about God and to learn about your faith. So that's like a step in the right direction. Okay, nobody's forcing you to be here, hopefully. And so I think the whole idea is to respect, we'll talk later. So the whole idea, I think, with Catholicism is there seems to be a lot of rules, and I think it boils down to trusting God. So God has a plan. God has rules to keep us happy. Father's homily today. And I think that he created me. He knows what's best for me. So sometimes, particularly me as a Catholic, learning my actual way in my late teens, early 20s, I really had a lot of, I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I love God. I trust him. So I'm going to walk this walk, and I might not understand it. I might not even like it. But I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I'm going to learn along the way why this is important to God that I do this. And sometimes that's okay. We don't always have to be like, oh, I'm so excited about doing this. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm doing this because I'm trusting, and then we kind of learn. So I think the idea is, it's respect for marriage. It's, why did God instill this covenant? Why did he make it a covenant? If he made it a covenant, a sacrament, then it must be something that is important. He created us. He created us as two different sexes. He created those sexes to unite. I will use the term sex, not gender. It's sort of old school for me, so that's where I am with it. And he created us to procreate. That be fruitful and multiply. That's what he wanted us to do. If we can. Some couples can't, and that's whatever that is with his plan there. And I think that the idea is that when you walk your walk as a husband and wife, it's supposed to reflect God's love for humanity, God's love for marriage, God's love for the covenant. And it should also be a reflection of the fact that it's a different relationship. I mean, my relationship with my husband is completely different than my relationship with anybody else, as well it should be. And part of that difference is based on our sexuality. Because, that's just obvious, right? But I think this sort of openness to life and this idea of, as I tell my high school students, God created sex, God loves sex, sex is a good thing, it was his idea, and he created it for babies and bonding. Okay, it is for the married couple to bond, and it is for the married couple to produce offspring. And so if you take sex out of the context of marriage, but if you also take it out of the context of babies and bonding, then you have a problem. And that's kind of where we're gonna lead into. And I think that beginning with the idea of being open to life is it has so many positive consequences. It's loving somebody even though they're not expected. It's loving somebody through sickness. It's loving somebody even though they are just a pain in your hiney. It's a lot of just understanding the preciousness of every single life. When you're just like, hey, this is where we are in our walk, and if God chooses to bless us with children or however many children, I am open to that idea.
And on that note, one of the So when we first got into natural family planning, and we'll tell you, we used contraception early on. I mean, that was just who we were. And it's not fine, but it's not terrible when you get to, like, we're not going to, I don't think we're going to hell because we did that, because we recognized what it was when we moved on, kind of thing. And I don't think someone who's a contraceptor is going to hell if they don't quite understand what they're doing. Kind of like I don't think people that don't come to church are going to hell because they don't come to church. I mean, we're not that church, you know. And people want to say that that's who we are, but we're not. Let me get off that horse real quick. But anyway, it's just, God, I'm so angry about that. Yeah, I know. There's no script. There's zero script in my life. But when we first got into natural family planning, like when somebody tried to explain it to me, I thought it's like, oh wait, so now what you're telling me is that every time you get together, the purpose must be to make life. And that's very confused, to think that. That's not the purpose. It's, you've got to recognize that there's always the possibility of a life, because that's the gift that God gave us. But if you go into it with this mindset of, wow, gosh, I'm not allowed to have sex unless I'm doing it in a marital attempt to make life, and otherwise don't ever do it. Like, if you're not sitting there going, hey, let's go have a baby, if that's not the only reason you're embracing your lovely bride or husband, then it's wrong. Then that would be kind of crazy, RCIA, I think.
Right, and that's why it's important, again, like I tell my kids, it's babies and bonding. It's not just babies. It's this whole idea that
like I'm really big on the bonding part. Let's just make that real clear.
Babies and bonding. And I think the idea is again, if you look at marriage relationship as set apart from any other relationship you have with somebody. Number one, it's a lifelong covenant. Friends come and go. Friends move. I mean, friends don't even come and go because I decide I don't like you anymore. I mean, you move away, I'm sad, right? It's a lifelong covenant, and part of the uniqueness of a relationship is that we give everything that we are to our husband or wife. Okay, it's not I give everything except for my fertility. It's I give you everything. And there is something, when I was learning about natural family planning, after we were married, because learning about your faith takes a minute. I thought that was just so interesting. That really struck me. It's like, wow, have we been holding back? I mean, I thought we were married. I thought that we were like, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, or I forget how that goes. I don't know, I think I said it wrong. But you know what I mean. Like, everything belongs to everybody, right?
All of my stuff is right. That simplifies it.
And it just kind of struck me, and I was like, wow, like, that's what marriage is about. It's like everything. Even like for me as a woman, it's I'm with him, and I give him everything, even the possibility that I could become pregnant. Like that's like a big deal for a woman. But then on the other hand, I'm married. Okay, so you get pregnant. It's kind of like, well, okay. I mean, well, that's not the end of the world, right? And we'll talk about a little bit about how, no, God is not saying, okay, you're in a Catholic relationship and now you're married and so now you have to have 10 kids. No, that is not what he is saying, nor is it what the church is saying either. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But the idea is, I remember we used to help out with youth group, and I remember one time, I don't know, we were talking about natural family planning, and I don't even remember who said it. It was probably Tim Kroger. And he said, the love between a man and a woman should be so intense, and it is so intense, that 9 months later you have to give it a name. And I thought, wow. Like, he nailed it. Like that's exactly right. Like, that's how amazing it should be. Okay? So what is, where is that? So I think that, let's sort of maybe separate out contraception versus natural family planning, because that's a big question. Like, what have you been talking about? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, but even when you were in med school, they didn't talk about natural family planning at all?
You know, sometimes you just don't hear everything. I do not remember that. I'm sure that, like, looking back, like, I remember learning about cycles and how all of that worked, and maybe that was in there, but I think it's one of those things sometimes, Amy, that, if people are talking to you about something and you don't know the vocabulary, then it kind of just, you kind of just don't register it, and I mean, my Catholic formation was very little. And so, I was like 5 when I was baptized. I received my first communion when I was like 13. And I didn't get confirmed until I was going to get married, because I was like, seems to me like I should be confirmed before I get married. Maybe, and it may have just been like, I don't know what that word means, so I just kind of left it. But the difference is that contraception blocks in one form or fashion the fertility of either the male or the female. Natural family planning does not. Natural family planning is simply an adjustment of our behavior, but it doesn't do anything to block the fertility of the couple. And I think that, again, it kind of goes into that I'm going to give everything that I have. And again, it goes into the idea that the church isn't calling you to have 10 children. The church is simply asking or stating, I suppose, as a married couple, this is your role. And I think it's a gift to teach us I don't want to say control of desires, like sexual desire is a bad thing, but we need to put it in the right context. As far as, maybe tonight is not the right time for us. Maybe we can do something else. And do we have that control over ourselves? Because I think that, we're going to control what we eat, and we're going to control what we watch, and we're going to control how much sleep we get, and we're going to control our temper, and we're going to control everything else. Why is it a negative thing to control our sexual desires? It shouldn't be a negative thing, depending on where you are.
And that's also, I mean, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but it's as far as the relationship is concerned, it really opens up a dialogue. So we didn't have the dialogue when we first got married, other than just generally understanding that there was contraceptives being used. It wasn't this sort of detailed. You don't have to. I mean, it's just it's a pill or whatever it is you're using. It's sort of quietly done. Natural family planning, it creates a discussion that really allows for dialogue about your sexuality, which is something that I think is lost in a lot of couples, generally speaking. But it's sort of something that you're doing a lot of, hopefully. And it reaches into your faith. I mean, it's kind of like you're having a dialogue about your faith while you're having a dialogue about your relationship, which I think is really, really beautiful. And again, I don't want to take the punch out of what we have to say later on, but it's what I found with us is that we actually had to talk about it. It wasn't this like, you come home and you're like, God, I hope today's the day kind of thing. You had a discussion. You knew when there were days that if this was going to be a sexually active day or an interactive day that way, there was a distinct possibility someone's going to be getting pregnant. So
hopefully the someone was me.
Yeah. And yeah. So, but the idea was, well, if we're not thinking about having kids right now, then probably we want to avoid that. Then you get into the abstinence discussion. And I mean, the magic of abstaining for a while so that you can then, have really great later on is really kind of, it's a dialogue we just didn't have. We don't speak that way. That's not our natural language with each other. Like when I say we, I'm really being very specific about Christina. We just didn't talk that way, but it forced us to actually talk about it, which I thought was kind of cool. It was sort of a collateral benefit to what we were doing, trying to be responsible and true to the Catholic teachings about where our bodies and following from the theology of the body, which is just an amazing thing, Pope John Paul did, or St. John Paul I guess did. So,
And I think I'm just gonna I think this is really important because I did not grow up talking about sex. Like that was like,
Taboo.
we don't talk about that.
Taboo.
And if anything, I mean, it was kind of a strain on our relationship a little bit because like, no, you don't talk about sex. Like, you don't talk about that. And it's so interesting, and we are sort of jumping ahead, but I think that's fine because it fits right now, is one of the benefits of natural family planning is this whole idea of when you do have children or you're around children or it's your nieces, nephews, or, just the kids in your youth group and you're teaching it, it helps them to understand, number one, God's design for marriage. Number two, the sanctity of life. Number three, this whole idea of sexuality with your spouses. And so I have 5 children. My oldest is 24. 3. 3. He's 23. I'm always right. Yeah, but not so much. So he's almost 24. So my oldest is almost 24, and he's married, and then I've got a 21-year-old, who will be 22 in March as well, and he's married, and they both have children. And it's funny, and maybe it's a little, they're in their 20s, they tend to be a little crass sometimes, right? But it's interesting to hear them openly discuss, not in a disrespectful way at all, but their sexuality between, the spouses. And to hear just the way that they talk about it, and it's just very open and very free between themselves, even if I walk into the room or something. And so it's to me it's striking because I did not grow up that way. And I think, man, what a beautiful gift they have starting out so young in their marriages, and that's just not an issue for them. And they both have children because they openly welcomed them. They do practice natural family planning, and it's not that it failed, it's that they just think life is beautiful and they're ready to have kids, and it was great, and it was beautiful. But anyway, just kind of touching on that, being able to sort of dialogue about it, we had to learn how to do that. My 2 children that are married haven't had to learn how to do that. And I have a 18-year-old that is dating and a 16-year-old that I don't even know what he's doing. I think he's dating, he refuses to admit it, but whatever. I've seen, because I'm the mom that checks the texts and stuff like that, okay? And it's beautiful to see them texting back and forth about how, I'm just not about that life. I'm not about having sex before marriage. And it's just, my 16-year-old is texting this girl that he likes about that. And that's amazing. And it's just sort of this hidden benefit of natural family planning that kind of leads right into that theology of the body, because you can't really have one without the other. And to watch the kids growing up, understanding that is, I never had that. It was like, okay, gonna be sexually active, better get on the pill. Okay.
Yeah, that was the only answer you got.
Yeah, and I was so poorly formed that I had no idea that went against my Catholic faith.
Yeah. And then when you hear that it goes against it, suddenly it becomes this sort of weird taboo barrier thing. Let's just not talk about that. We'll tuck it into this corner. And I think that's just a disservice to everybody. I mean,
Sure.
It's a disservice to the church. It's a disservice to yourself, your relationship, and all that. But to understand that it's actually a very positive part of our faith.
Which is how it was, which is, so let's get to that. Let's get to that real quick, because I want to talk about how we found out. Because I think, you might not even remember, but I do.
I found out when I was told. We were doing this.
That's not how I found out. So basically, what am I even talking about? So natural family planning. So basically, it's using God's design. So God designed us as men and women. Natural family planning is using the signs and symptoms that a woman has with ovulation. So when you ovulate, if you would like to, and so natural family planning is also used to help couples that are having trouble conceiving to conceive. So it's not just no babies, okay? It's also hey man, you're having some trouble. Let's use these signs and symptoms, and I'm going to tell you exactly when is going to be the opportune time. And so it works both ways. But it's using the natural design of the woman's body, and different signs and symptoms will fluctuate throughout the month. And so if one is interested in that, then they learn about them and they learn how to read them, and you can chart your monthly cycles, and then it's just, I was just shocked. It's just clear as day. It just really is. It's just clear as day on what are going to be your fertile days and what are your infertile days, and then you abstain on your infertile days if you aren't ready to have another child or to have a child at all at this point, or whatever number you are. And on the fertile days, then if you're open to the idea of having another kiddo, and actively want to try to do that, then those are your days. So I want to talk about this. So how did so I didn't know anything, and I remember one day there used to be this little Catholic shop called the Catholic Shop, right on McCardle, like across from like Cavender's. I don't know. We all remember. Most of us remember where it was, right? The little cute little Catholic shop. It was really tiny, then it kind of expanded. And so I'm walking out of the Catholic shop one day, and a good friend of mine, Pamela, and I was walking in, and I don't even know why. I had known her for years, and we had talked and everything, and probably had known her for maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. And so we were just chit-chatting in the parking lot, and then all of a sudden we started talking about natural family planning. I don't even know why. I think maybe she was buying a book for someone, like a book that you could chart on or something. And we just kind of started talking about it, and I was like, and we had one child at the time. And that really just sort of sparked the conversation. And Pamela and I she is like super, super intense, okay? If you don't know her, she's like super intense, and she is super intense about her faith, but she's so sweet and loving and charitable. And it's that I take my faith seriously, but I'm gonna love you right where you are. And it's that combination, because I think in any faith, but obviously I'm Catholic because I think Catholicism is the fullness of truth. I think that you can't be wishy-washy, because if not, it's like, well, then why practice NFP if it doesn't really, But you still have to be charitable, and she had that balance, and that's kind of where we just kind of, went from there. And I don't really remember the details, but we had one child at the time, and then I guess we were really just about thinking about, planning our second child, as they say. And it was kind of this idea of, hey, you know what, like, once we go off the pill, we're just not going to go back on it. And we didn't.
And it helped that Pamela's husband worked with me, so then there was that sort of pincer movement. It's like it's coming from both sides. Tom, her husband, is less intense, like Pamela's visibly intense. Like she'll talk to you, like get in your face kind of thing. Tom's just a sort of very quiet spoken, but super intense guy. And he was the one that kind of, I don't know if anybody's ever gone on the Journey to Damascus or one of those types of, Cursillo type weekends. So he invited me to go while I was not Catholic yet. And it's a nice ecumenical weekend, and really, I was still at that phase where I was like, I'm not going to get to that, come on, But I did, and it was beautiful because I got to meet Father Bob, who was like my first real priest friend. And then slowly but steadily, I just kind of drifted over into the church.
Yeah, and we actually started planning. We actually started practicing natural family planning before you even became Catholic.
Before I became Catholic, yeah. Because it just made sense to me. Because I like, not to get into politics, but I like my guns and I like my babies. Those are the two things I vote about. So, so it made a lot of sense, for me. And then, so that I never really had an issue with the kind. Once I understood that it wasn't just about, I don't know what it was. It's just like the way it was. When I heard about it before, it was always couched in the most negative form possible, in my mind, or at least I was receiving it very negatively. And maybe that's my hope, is that we're kind of going to become these vessels of positive communication, because I think that's what wins cases, and the idea of just being, like, sex is bad and everybody needs to stop, it's just like, okay, no, That's not what we're saying. And natural family planning isn't this like, voodoo or something out there. It's an incredibly natural and beautiful way of being aware of your body and your relationship with each other. And it actually made our relationship tighter.
Which is a common thing that people will say, and I think the positive aspect is that fertility, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise out there right now about sex in general, and about fertility and all kinds of craziness going on. But I think that the idea is that kind of like he was saying as far as couple relationship is that it's really sort of this way of life. It's this way of viewing life. It's this way of viewing that my fertility is not a disease. My fertility is not something to be suppressed. As a woman, I'm not just this sexual object that is, here at his beck and call no matter what. Now, we may want to be together no matter what with this idea of, hey, open to life. But if that's not the case, then we both are in agreement with that. And that fertility is a gift. And I think that some of the churches in town they give a little presentation for young girls ages like 10 to 14, right about the time that they're going to start menstruating, and they teach them about it. And I think that that's kind of where it starts. They teach them about menstruation, not about natural family planning. But I think that that's where it starts, because when a girl is on her period, it's just the worst. And it's just, oh my gosh, and I hate it, and it hurts, and why does God do this to me, and it's every month. And it's such a negative view of menstruation, as opposed to, oh my gosh, every month you get to be reminded that you can be a co-creator in life. Like, wow. Are these 14-year-old girls thinking that? Like, what a gift. And nobody's teaching them that. They're just, teaching them how much, and not that it's not, it's miserable. It can be miserable, and not that you're negating that, but to just have that idea of, hey, but this is why. Because you get this gift every month to be reminded that you get to be a co-creator. That's amazing. Like, that's amazing. And so to see it as that gift, and not to see it as this negative thing that I have a period every month, but then it's the same thing, not to see this as my fertility as in, oh, it just gets in the way. It's such a hassle. I don't want to have to deal with it. I'll just take a pill or whatever. And it's like, well, but, now we're just, throwing the gift aside. And how often do we do that with our faith, not just with our fertility? And I think that's where it kind of goes back to this idea of sometimes you have to walk in those shoes of obedience before you really understand the gift. But if you think about it, that's how we do things as humans, right? When we teach our kids obey because we tell them to. And then they learn why. And that's okay. Sometimes we have to do the same thing, and I don't think that should be a negative.
And even though we went into this, I think, with the right mind set, like we learned about natural family planning, we thought that's the right thing to do. The gifts that we've received from it are not really the purpose that we went into it to begin with. Starting with I really do feel like we participate in each other's lives a lot more because, I'm physically aware of her and things that are going on that before I was like, right, you just didn't really consider what that meant. So, as a period was just, she's on a period. And it became just a throwaway joke. Whereas now and that's a reflection of, the life, sort of co-participation that she's a part of and I'm a part of myself, potentially. And it's a time for us to be able to discuss, it's that opportunity for abstinence. And then really it's the, sort of the broader participation in the church. Which, and I don't want to be like, oh, hey, the church is my entire life. But in a way, it sort of is, when I think about it. It's like, I do consider myself, question?
No, I think that with what you're saying, it teaches discipline just
Yeah.
the same. And God teaches discipline.
Right.
I mean, he corrects his kids, whatever, through discipline.
Yeah.
And discipline doesn't necessarily mean getting the rod and whipping you. It's
Right.
just, hey, showing you what the right thing is.
Yeah.
And with natural family planning, it's teaching the ones that are married how to do that, and welcoming a child should that be in the cards.
Right. And there's always that sort of the hidden. We used to do martial arts, and there's always like the hidden technique. You know, when you did this one thing, you're like, okay, this is to block someone from punching me in the face. But while you're at it, you're also counterpunching or something because of the motion. That's the hidden technique. I thought when God creates this discipline, is that, well, okay, you don't quote blindly. We made the decision to follow the instruction, but in so doing, the hidden sort of benefits are just it's really infinite. You know, the relationship grows stronger. You learn more about each other. I feel I'm participating more in a church without even showing up at the church. You know, like it's because you're doing your bit, so to speak. And we don't do formal talks like this, just so you understand. But somehow the word got out, and then so people, I don't know. I guess they're talking out of school, but it did. Huh? Okay, so yeah, so the word gets out just generally, and I mean, we ended up on the front page of the South Texas Catholic at some point. I was just like,
Yeah, they're like, we're
holy.
gonna do a little tiny article on you, and I get it, and we're like on the front page. I was
Yeah,
like,
like
that's
literally a
not
whole family. Oh, natural family.
That's not natural family planning, and it was beautiful, and I think that I think that understanding that like we didn't always walk the perfect natural family planning walk, and that was in the South Texas Catholic article. This was ages ago, probably like 10 years ago.
So,
You know, it's
but you never know who you're
helpful to
impacting.
somebody to see. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's the whole point.
right.
You never know how you're impacting people. Like I think, so go therefore and make disciples of all nations. That's like my thing. Okay, like I was a lay director on a journey. I actually picked that as my phrase, and it was like, so I always thought it was like this. You got to deliberately go out there and do it, become a missionary, go to Africa, and that's the only way you're ever going to spread the word. First of all, shut up. You know, that is not the only way to spread the word. And if I'm going to Africa, I'm going to a nice Marriott somewhere, and I'm not going to do missionary work. Just saying, got to be honest with you. So it's like she wants to go do the El Camino. I'm like, I'm quite sure there's got to be Marriotts all along that, because I'm not saying it
I
hostile.
know. See, we can go.
Yeah, you guys can do your little hostel thing. I'll be staying at the hotel. But the point is, we didn't know how this was going to impact people. We didn't set out to impact people, but you do. And in a weird kind of way, we're doing, the church's work through this. But that was certainly not our intention, like at all. There was this quiet thing we were doing.
Or
It was-
even just seeing the benefits with our kids. You know, I mean, that wasn't. I mean, I guess I intended to teach them, to do what I thought was right, but then to just see, them embrace it, was. I guess it is what you long for as a parent, but I think.
Can you speak a little bit to, you've talked a lot about the dialogue between the two, but the dialogue this way with God, like being co-creators, like.
Sure, there's a.
What if we just went, huh?
I think, but I think that really impacted me. I think that it's sort of the idea of, starting out with the 14-year-old when you're teaching her about menstruation, and just this idea of, actually that was in my notes somewhere, is, guess what? You are not always in control. And I think that this whole idea of being a co-creator with God is trusting Him in timing, and let's be real. Even if we were planning all of our babies, do we really ever have enough time and enough money to have babies? No, nobody ever has enough time or enough money to have babies. I mean, if you're gonna wait till the right time, like we still wouldn't be married. I mean, both of my kids got married young, and I'm totally fine with that, because, you find the person, you find the person. And I think that it is a trust about timing. It is a trust about ultimately, I think a lot of my dialogue with God is I have really come to this place in my life to where He created me, and so there's just no way that I know better than He does. And, it probably took me a minute to get there, but I think that it is so freeing to be there. And maybe some see it as a cop-out, but I derive such freedom from being able to say, hey, you know what? Because I truly believe in this faith, and I truly think this faith is the fullness of truth, that I can then say, hey, you know what? Thank God, has some of this stuff written down for me, be it through the magisterium, or be it through amazing doctors of the church, or fathers of the church, or whatever, to where I really can just say, hey, you know what? What am I supposed to do? Okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is great. And I understand that sounds like a cop-out sometimes, but I really don't think it is, because I'm following what I know to be true. But I'm also understanding that I'm only human, so I don't have all the answers, and I praise God that He, miraculously somehow did get them written down through whoever it was that helped Him to do that, or that He helped through them, whatever the right phrasing is. And so it's really just a trust thing. And the benefits have been amazing. We planned, our oldest, and kind of sort of maybe planned our second, right? Because we got off contraception for our second. And then we kind of just didn't plan anymore, and our journey with NFP was, I guess just kind of a trusting thing. And we were pretty good sometimes, and then sometimes you're kind of like, well, Or sometimes I was really good about charting, like you can really actually get a calendar. Now they have apps, but I'm kind of old school, right? I like paper. And you get your paper and you mark all your days and that sort of thing. And, and then sometimes you're like, I haven't really charted for the past couple of months. I'm kind of just keeping it in my head. If it's really like you're like, this is not the time, like, keep them in your head. That's not a good idea. But that's kind of where I think NFP is really beautiful, because it also sort of leaves this spectrum of where you are. Are we just in a situation where, I don't know, emotionally, financially, we're moving, job, I don't know what it is, where we're just like, you know what, we need to hang on a second, we need to postpone for just a minute, and we're going to be real strict about our sexuality and our NFP, or is it kind of like, well, we're kind of sort of counting. But, and so, I don't know, you can kind of play with it a little bit. And I think finding out that we were pregnant when we weren't planning it was really kind of amazing, because where we were was just kind of like, yeah, that's cool. We were excited about it, and it was, it's interesting. It certainly wasn't the unplanned pregnancy sort of feel that I think some couples have sometimes. And I think that's beautiful because of the trust with God. And it's like, okay, it's a baby, and we're married, and because even some married couples that have unplanned pregnancies, it's so stressful, and it's like this, like the world is coming to an end type feeling. And I think one of the benefits of natural family planning is that you don't feel that way, because you have this openness, dialogue with my husband, dialogue with God of, hey, wow, how beautiful is this? It does make the miscarriages a little tougher, for sure, because, but I think that, there's a lot to learn through that as well, and just learning that, wow, life is beautiful and life is sacred, and, yeah.
Well, to answer your question also, like I said at the beginning, this was not my plan to have a big family. And when we kind of got into that, then I realized that perhaps I'm not in as control as I thought I was. And I think that's maybe one of the problems of converts, is we believe that we made this choice, as a result we're that much better, or something, like you're actually in control of your decision. And I chose to come in, so I get to do the things I want to do. Well, you know, that's not the case. I mean, when you come in, like you've just decided, look, I want to do say yes to Catholicism. You're saying yes to all of it. You know, it's like you can't say, well, you know, the whole buffet thing, but it's like, and this was one of the ones that just kind of, it clicked with me. I was like, man, I guess I'm all in. You know, like this really needs to be my way. And it helped me with the other parts of my faith, you know, that, you know, maybe weren't as much of an issue as like this. So, you know, Christine will tell you, I wake up early because I like to do yoga, which, you know, I know some people are like, oh my gosh, you know, the devil's gonna get you doing yoga. It's like, no, he's not. So, but that's a whole other thing. So, but part of my thing is I read, and I like to read the scriptures in the morning, and I pull out my phone, just kind of, I do it the easy way, right? And I used to actually grab I was reading from the Bible, but I like to have the lights off, so I can just sit there and I sleep in my underwear. Okay, you know a lot about me now. So, and I just don't want to put stuff on just to go out in case somebody's at the house, whatever. So I'm just sitting there. I've got my coffee. I'm reading. And that's where that dialogue with God really engages. And, you know, there's this thing that I do. It's an examination of conscience of sorts, but it's like, what have you done and what will you do kind of stuff. And it always, these things are the ones that come up a lot. For me, it's like, at least I've got that, you know, like I'm doing my bit for you, God. When God is, you know, having that dialogue with me in the morning, and I'm not literally having a conversation, I'm not that crazy yet, but it's, but I do feel there's that connection, and I'm like, good, you know, at least I'm doing this part. When you're really down, and you're just like, I just suck. I suck as a Catholic. I just, you know, all this kind of stuff. And you can, this is one of my little tricks that someone taught me. That's your Father Bob. He was like, well, count out the things you know you're doing well. And then all those other things that you're depressed about or bringing you down, it's like, why am I even doing this? You know, it's like, this is not possible. It's crazy Catholics, you know. It's like, well, you know, we're doing national family planning. I'm sitting here praying, you know, this morning, you know, before the sun comes up. I'm reading the Bible, you know, just like, so you go through all that, and then suddenly you realize, you know, I'm not such a bad person. You know, sort of thing. So one of the connections with God, I think, has been, you know, natural family planning being one of my go-tos. What's really cool is to when you're with someone who is going to do it as well, and that's maybe one thing we haven't touched on. It's a joint decision. You both have to be in, because if you're not, then you've just got one very irritated partner, you know. And I mean, I'm sure some people do it, but you know, and they're just like, no, not today, kind of deal when they know, well, whatever. I mean, yeah, it would be very difficult to do. It would be very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's still a control thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be totally.
Yeah, that would be weird.
That would be very weird. So, but really, I think that it's just improved a lot with the communications, because I just feel like we're actually doing something good. I mean, and it's a throwaway for me. I mean, I think it's very easy once you kind of get into it, and actually kind of cool. It sort of raised the level up, so to speak, without going into too much detail. But I just think it did. So.
Yeah, somebody, there was when I was kind of researching for the talk, one of the, I can't remember if it was a lady or a gentleman, but anyway, either the husband or the wife had said that, you know, they felt like, I guess they collectively felt that after every period of abstinence, they felt like it was just a wedding night all over again. I was like, oh, that is so cool. Like, that's really beautiful.
Whereas the other way, if there's abstinence when it's sort of pushed on you or something like that, then it's just kind of like, I'm just mad at you know, sort of thing. And you don't even want to, so to speak. But this is just like you're usually, yay, let's go, you know, like a bunch of little high schoolers, but which is great in my opinion. So we've been going, I think, almost 45 minutes.
Yeah. Do we want to open it up?
Sure.
Questions?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Do you guys have
yeah.
any questions?
There's two objections that I've often heard made to natural family planning. I'm certain if you all give a lot of talks, you must have run into these, so I'm curious how you'd answer them. One is that it's mislabeling it natural when you have to do all these calculations. I mean, people say, well, how natural is that compared to just popping a pill, which seems very natural to most Americans for everything.
Right.
And the other objection is, and you may be more familiar with this than I am since you're a physician, but I've heard it said that a woman most instinctively wants to have sex at the time of her highest fertility. So to avoid it at that particular time seems very counter-natural.
Sure. So let me address the first question first, because the
No,
second
no,
one's
no,
kind of
let's
funny.
say- let's
The
say
second
for
one
the
is
top.
No, we're going to talk about it in a second. Hold on. No, that's fine. So I think you answered the question, because the problem is that all the noise out there, the definition of natural is apparently we don't know that anymore. We don't even know the definition of sex anymore. And I'm talking sex like female, male sex. So much that we've renamed it into a term of gender, which I don't even know where that came from, but that's a whole different talk. And so I think the idea of natural family planning is using what happens to my body naturally and just using that as measures. And yes, it does mean counting days, or yes, it does mean checking cervical mucus, which is a highly effective way of doing it, or yes, it does mean taking your body temperature. So yes, I'm doing stuff, but I'm only observing what my body is doing naturally. I mean, another objective is, well, isn't it just contraception after all? You're still choosing not to have a baby. And there's a difference in terminology there. I can be choosing to not have a baby at this time, but at the same time be open to the possibility, because I know pretty darn well that God can do whatever he wants to. And I am leaving myself open to that. So I can be counting days, and I can be checking cervical mucus, and I can be taking my temperature, but I know that if God wants me to have a baby and he's just dead set on it, it's going to happen. The pill fails too, as do condoms, as do everything else. It's not like there's not a failure rate for other things as well. Natural family planning done correctly, so you can practice it correctly or you can practice it incorrectly. I would say we practice it correctly probably around 50% of the time, and we practice it incorrectly 50% of the time, because that's just where we were. Practice correctly, it's 98 to 99% effective. Okay? Just as effective as taking the pill, much more effective than a condom. Practice incorrectly, it's still 96 to 97% effective. Depending on how incorrectly you practice it, obviously. It gets slower, right? But the idea is it's not contraception, because I'm still open to life. And it's that heart, it's God. Father said it today in the homily. It's the idea of, where's my heart? Is my heart open to the possibility of children, or am I artificially closing it off?
And that's the sort of the meme response to that answer, the quick, because no one's going to give you the amount of time that it took Christina to explain that, when they're really just being they're just objectors, right? So the answer is simply, natural family planning is not a block. It's not an artificial barrier being created by an external force, so to speak. You're using the natural body. Everything else is a barrier. I mean, down to the clips that they put on fallopian tubes to prevent, to sterilize women. And that's like obviously a block, right? Like you just created a barrier. There's like the eggs cannot get in there, so to speak. And then whatever happens with the pills and what it does to your just forget what happens to the rest of your body, but it just kind of blocks things off. And then Paragard, just like putting in like these things to just kind of destroy the uterus, so to speak, or really the tubes for a while, scar them up so you can't have an implantation. Those are artificial barriers. This is a natural version of doing it. It's just sort of abstaining at certain times. It's how you get there, like the calculating and all that. Yeah, sure, maybe that's unnatural.
It takes some effort.
It takes
Sure.
some effort,
It takes some effort.
but it's like you haven't changed anything about the bodies.
Yeah.
Is really the short answer is because we haven't changed it. It's just what you've changed is your activity.
Yeah,
Your behavior.
what you're changing is your behavior, which goes back to, can I discipline myself or not on a variety of things, which really leads into your second question.
And there are times that I can't.
Right, and
Which gets to the second question.
your second question, you're 100% right. I will tell you, even if he didn't look at my chart, this man always knew when I was ovulating.
Yes.
Every time. He was always like, "You're ovulating, aren't you?" Yes.
As I'm like going.
That's how God made it, right? Babies and bonding. God wants us to be fertile and multiply. He wants us to have babies. So of course, during that time, I don't know how he does it, but yeah, it's more enticing. And so,
And she could literally be in sweats, with her ponytail to the side, drinking a coffee, looking at me. I'm like, you're looking hot.
So, but then it's that idea of, where is your heart? I mean, because certainly taking a pill all the time is going against that, So then it's like, well, again, where is your heart? Okay, well, yes, but I really think that right now is not the time. We're still open, but right now is not the time. But absolutely, that is a very true statement. And most couples will tell you that they will know when they're ovulating, and sometimes it's hard during those periods. But you know what? Sometimes God calls us to do things that are difficult, and that's okay, because it strengthens character and it strengthens relationships, and it really helps us to understand sometimes why we are doing. If it were easy, you don't gain anything out of it, and you don't really have a question as to why. Why am I doing this? Because I'm trying to find favor, not in the way some Protestants feel that Catholics are trying to find favor with God, but I'm trying to please Him because I love Him. Not because I'm scared of Him or not because of whatever, but just because I love Him, and I want to do what He wants me to do. And yeah, it's a call during those times.
And it's beautiful to be able to do it mutually. So sometimes it's like an opportunity to mutually mortify yourself, and offer it up to God and have that discussion with Him, and to just be like, this is why we're doing it. So.
Any other questions?
Question, just a couple comments. Just something you mentioned about being a cop-out to follow your faith and have faith.
Right.
Because it's not an easy thing, and a cop-out is when you get to the fork in the road, you take the easy way and you get out of it, but it's very difficult to follow along in your faith. And the other thing too about converts is I think converts do it better because they've actually had to sit and physically and mentally decide, is this the way for me? Is this the way I'm being called? Is this what I'm going to do? Whereas those who have been in a faith, not necessarily Catholic, but any, you kind of get, into the lull of things, and you don't really question why and how, and is this what I need to be doing?
Well said.
Anybody else? Anything else?
When you talk to your students, outside of your family students, do you hear from parents? Do they come back with, if they've discussed it with their parents?
They do, but so I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess it depends on what level of evangelization one thinks that I should be doing. So I teach at it's a small little Catholic co-op that we formed, and so I'm pretty much preaching to the choir, but not always, because they're still teenagers, and teenagers have their thoughts and views on stuff, and teenagers still affected by others. And I do get the occasional question where it's challenging. I had well, where exactly does it say that you can't be gay in the Bible? So we had to have that discussion. But the question is asked wanting to understand an answer, not trying to have an argument. And we've had contraception discussions where it's like, okay, well, now explain to me again why. And so usually the parents are grateful, but yeah, and it's I've got a student right now that wants to become Catholic. He'll start RCIA here actually next year, and he's interested in doing that. His mother's Catholic. She just never got him baptized or anything. She kind of took a minute. She's back, but so.
It helps that he's dating the super Catholic
He
girl.
is dating the super Catholic girl. She's like reeling in, right? Flirt to convert, as they say. But so yeah, so I've put myself in this particular position is not, yeah. The parents are, I'm teaching what they want me to teach, so it's easy, I guess. But still work.
Can you speak a little bit as a physician in terms of the ramifications of the pill?
Sure. So I'm a pediatrician, and even though I'm a pediatrician, obviously pediatricians prescribe the pill all the time because unfortunately kiddos have sex. So I never did. All my patients knew that I didn't, and nobody even asked me to prescribe it because they just knew that I wasn't going to. So I really never had an issue. I think I was asked like twice in my entire career, to prescribe it, and I was like, well, I don't do that. And so, then we just moved on with our lives. So I never prescribed the pill. Obviously because it conflicted with my faith. So there's a bunch of different pills out there, and they work, a bunch of different ways. Obviously, the end goal is to prevent pregnancy, and they do it through hormones. Most of them prevent ovulation most of the time. That is their goal. But if ovulation does occur, then the uterus is not a friendly environment for implantation, and so then even if you have ovulation and you have fertilization, then it's not gonna be an implantable baby, which obviously conflicts with your faith, because then you have a baby that isn't allowed to survive. So I guess if you're going in the level of confliction, obviously contracepting in general is bad, but then getting rid of babies, even if it's unintentional, is worse. There's a level there. A lot of women don't like the way it makes them feel when they start taking the pill. It does. It messes with your hormones. It messes with your natural cycle. It messes with stuff like what you're saying is just the pheromones and the kind of husband being in tune to that time in his wife, that even if you're choosing to abstain during that time, it's kind of a gift. It's kind of like, he's kind of thinking that she's hot, and that's kind of you want to kind of have that, right? You want to kind of have that. Every once in a while, I get kind of super attracted to her for no apparent reason, because she's apparently in sweats with a ponytail on the side of her head. And so I think that, when it's funny because you don't maybe realize all of those little things that you're messing with, that God designed to keep you guys in this relationship that is set apart from all other relationships. Why? Because it's supposed to be a covenantal relationship until death do you part. How many marriages reach that point? If you're a Christian that goes to church, it's like 50% of them. And if you're a Christian that goes to church with the right heart and the right attitude, and you guys actually practice your faith together, then I think you're getting like 70 to 80% success rate. Okay, but why? Maybe that's. It's not even maybe. That's obviously part of it. When you start messing around with that kind of stuff, I think I'm tangent intention from her question. But when you start messing around with that kind of stuff, you know, it's as simple as, you know, he doesn't sense that, you know, 2 or 3 day period every month to where he's super attracted to me, you know, because I took that away from him. And then I wonder, well, why he's not super attracted to me anymore. Well, because you just did it to yourself type situation.
And to follow up a little bit on the pill, like she's probably said more about it than I know. But, you know, like in my practice, we do, like I'm a federal criminal defender at one level, but I also do a lot of civil work. And one of the things that we're very involved in is this litigation around the country where we're representing women who have been damaged by the Filshie clips, which is those clips that they put on the fallopian tubes. So what happens is they put them on, and then 25% of the time they'll migrate away from the tube, and sort of it gets into organs, it goes into all bits and pieces. And I just stumbled into this. This wasn't part of my being Catholic. I went out to start this. It's like I got the client that way, and so then I got involved in this nightmare of a lawsuit against some pretty big companies. And we have about 300 clients around the country that have experienced this, and there's thousands and thousands of women I know just that are contacting us, and we're trying to sift through to see who we can help, who we cannot help. Putting aside what you may think about lawsuits and whether or not that's an answer to things, understanding what happened here, it's, you know, the medical device companies decided that they would put these titanium clips on women's fallopian tubes as a way, instead of tying the tubes or cauterizing them. Putting aside whether or not that's right or wrong, it's like, because that's essentially just blocking, you know, the opportunity for any kind of pregnancy. And just really these poor eggs are just, they just die, I suppose, when they get released on a monthly basis. And it's just, but the idea that they put these titanium clips in there and somehow think that's okay, you know, like that this is how we're going to deal with it, and that's not going to have an impact physically on the woman. And they knew about the migration problem. They didn't report it. They said it was 0.13% would migrate, but really it was 25%. But putting that aside, they put in an extra into the women, and now she's got to deal with these issues. You know, it's manifested with their relationship with their spouses, because there's pain, there's pelvic pain. That's how they know that there's a problem down there. And because of this pelvic pain, their relation, they're not having any relationship.
You had a couple that ended up getting separated because of
Yeah, no, the number of women that have come in and then been divorced since we've taken them on is really quite interesting because of this pain, you know.
And it's sort of like it's, I mean, the pill is the easy one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just take a pill, you know, but there's other, you know, any way that you prevent pregnancy, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know how to really word that, but any way you try to prevent pregnancy is really kind of detrimental to the woman's organs when you think about what you're doing, you know. And so it's yes, it's the pill that is going to cause problems, but it's the clips or it's the IUD, you know, yeah, let's just, you know, put something up in the uterus that's going to just constantly scrape away at the lining. That just seems like a bad idea, you know. And so you've got, it's all kinds of things that are going to cause troubles and destructions that aren't necessary, because really, if we count days and check cervical mucus or take your temperature or whichever method you want to do, you know, yeah, it takes a little effort, but taking the easy road, I mean,
Is not the easy.
Is not the easy road, and it's not the right road. I mean, we teach our children that, right? You know, sometimes you gotta take that hard path. Before I forget, just I gave you 2 pieces of paper. One is an outline, but the other one is a resource thing. You know, and I mean, and obviously not everybody in this room is married or engaged or of childbearing age or childbearing sex or, you know, whatever, but you know, maybe you know somebody that could use it. I'll tell you, so the Billings method is probably the one that you hear about a lot. The Crichton, which is the 3rd one down, is probably, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's the most popular. I don't know if it is or not, but I'm gonna say that it probably is. It's not that difficult to use at all. It's basically based on cervical mucus. And that's what I used, was the Crichton method. These two are very, very similar. They're almost the same method. I think really the Crichton method took what Billings did and kind of just stepped it up a notch, basically. But you know, if you were going to refer somebody, or if you're interested in looking at a method, I would look at this Crichton method, and it's not difficult to use. You don't have to buy anything. So anyway, I just want to make sure that you guys knew what this sheet was. Any other questions? Anything else that you wanted us to add?
I can't think of it. Maybe we can conclude with a prayer.
Sure. Please.
Lord God, we love you, and bless you, we adore you, glorify you. We thank you for the gift of today and the opportunity to hear your teaching. And we ask you that each and every day we would be able to fall in love more and more with you. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.